Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Nathan sent me an interesting article about robocallers, one of my favorite topics. And we've discussed before about the problem of robocallers and the question about whether or not they can be stopped and what we could do about it if we actually had the wherewithal and the inclination to do so. I'm convinced that the people in the government don't want to stop robocalls because, of course, they make tons of money for certain people. And when people make tons and tons of money, they can often lobby to have laws kept in place that protect them or to keep laws out of place from stopping them. So from ZDNet is a story about a simple telephone honeypot received 1.5 million robocalls across 11 months. These are researchers who are doing a study to determine what they could see if they actually set up phones just to watch how many calls came in. They said that most campaigns take place in short burst storms and that answering a robocall does not mean you'll be targeted for more robocalls in the future. And that's one of the debates we've had, is if somebody calls you and you know it's a robocall, should you call and mess with them or not? Because I like to mess with them if I've got the time. Keep them on the line for a while so they can't bother somebody else. And I've had other people say, well, Steve, if you do that, then that'll make you get more calls. And these guys say, according to their study, no. So Catalin Simpanu wrote the article and talks about an award-winning paper that was recently presented at Usenix, which is a security conference. A team of academics from North Carolina State University presented a list of findings from operating a massive telephone honeypot. And a honeypot, of course, is a term from espionage where you use something that looks too good to be true in the hopes of luring in the bad people. And they ran this for 11 months for the sole purpose of identifying, tracking, and analyzing robocalls. So NCSU researchers said they ran 66,000 telephone lines between March of 2019 and January of 2020, during which time they received 1.4 million calls, unsolicited 1.4 million calls, even when they didn't make those phone numbers public. And I can tell you, I've talked to people before who said that they got a new phone number and it immediately got a robocall. I've talked to people also who said that they've got a phone system installed, and as it was being set up, the robocall started coming in. They're just auto-dialing. 99 times out of 100, just an auto-dial. So the research team said they usually received an unsolicited call on average every 8.42 days, but most of the robocall traffic came in sudden surges they referred to as storms. And those happened at regular intervals. And so when that happened, the numbers went off the charts. They said this suggests that the operators of these systems, these robocalling systems, are using a tactic of a short burst and well-organized campaigns. In total, they tracked 650 of these storms over 11 months, with most being of roughly the same size, which makes you think it might be the same people. But the research team also said that not all calls during the storm were from the robocallers themselves, and a large chunk of calls also came from real people. Imagine that, real people using the phone. Researchers believe this happened because at the time of the storm, the robocalling operation had been using a technique known as caller ID spoofing. And that is what allows them to hide their real phone numbers and pass themselves off as being real people, just other people. If victims of the robocalling campaign missed the call and called back the spoofed number, they'd eventually end up calling the research team's honeypot telephone numbers. Ironically, researchers also caught a storm outside of their honeypot network. Interestingly, a colleague in our lab was a victim of a storm event. He was overwhelmed with calls from hundreds of strangers complaining that they had received a call from him. Needless to say, he was unable to use his phone for a few days until the calls died down. So what happened was they had used his number as the spoof number. And I've mentioned before, I've gotten phone calls at my office on my desk phone that says that they're coming from Beaumont Hospital in Royal Oak. Now, if I were to call Beaumont and complain, they'd go, we didn't call you. Someone else called you. But I know better than to call that number back. But there are people out there who go, why am I getting these harassing phone calls? And they call the number back and they get somebody who's not making the phone calls. The NCSU team also recorded a 10% sample of the robocalls they received, which they later analyzed using audio processing tools to try to determine the source and the content of the call itself. Academics said they detected 2,600 unique robocalling campaigns, with the largest ones promoting student loans, health insurance, Google search promotion services, and social security scams. And so I get all of these. The student loan one tells you they can get you a better interest rate on your student loan. Health insurance is telling you either that you can get health insurance from them or that your health insurance has been canceled. Google search promotion is a weird one, but they'll actually have a voice that says, our research indicates that you are ranking very low on Google, or that you have very, very bad rating on Google, very bad ratings on Google, and we can fix that for you. And of course, social security scams can be everything from your social security number has been canceled to your benefits are about to be cut off, something like that. And they're all scams. They're all scams. Now, the research team's largest finding was that after answering over 1.5 million robocalls across 66,000 phone numbers, researchers said they didn't see a spike in subsequent robocalls. So news reports and regulatory agencies recommend phone users to avoid answering calls from unknown numbers to reduce the number of robocalls. Surprisingly, we found that answering the calls does not necessarily increase the number of robocalls you'll receive. Phone users should be cautious when you get a call from an unknown number. However, occasionally answering an unsolicited phone call does not mean you'll receive more robocalls. Now, it doesn't mean you should answer the phone. If you recognize it, I've gotten to the point where I can recognize the goofy ones. And the most common ones come to my cell phone with the first 6 digits of my phone number. That is the exchange and then the first 3 digits of my phone number. And so it looks like not only is it a local call, but it's like almost related to my phone. And the ones I get at my office are the same thing. And it's a Royal Oak exchange and the area code for the area. And so you might say, Steve, isn't your office in Southfield? Yes, it is. But I got the phone number years ago when I first went to Royal Oak. And then when I moved to Southfield, I took the phone with me. And the phone number followed me. And so I've had that number now for 20 years, maybe? Quite a while, 15, 20 years. So when I get phone calls in Southfield from Beaumont Hospital that aren't from Beaumont, it's because a robocalling device out there is just spoofing local numbers, and all it's doing is it's yanking the area code in the first 3 off my phone number and plugging that back in. Additional details about the NCSU robocalling research project are available in the Who's Calling? Characterizing robocalls through audio and metadata analysis, which is an academic paper. The research team paper also received the conference's Distinguished Paper Award. And I'll tell you right now, for putting up with that kind of nonsense, they deserve an award. So just to be clear here, to get these facts that they've put in their paper, they monitored 66,000 telephone lines, 66,000 telephone numbers, and received 1.48 million phone calls, and then crunched the data on what that revealed. And what we can take away from this is that I'm guessing the existence of the storms, the clusters, the bunches. In other words, if you were to graph this, there'd be spikes, right? And I'm guessing what you can take away from that is that there are companies out there, entities out there, that want to do some kind of campaign using robocalls. And they will sit down and organize it and then do a blast. And based on extremely just low-level analysis that I've done in my own head of how spam emails work, I suspect that what's happening here is that they just do the blast and see what happens. And if it works, they do another blast. But if that blast doesn't work, then they modify it a little bit and do another blast. Because these scams, whether they're by phone or by email or by fax in the old days, you'll see that they often look alike, but with a slight change. They've tweaked something. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do a blast, make a few million phone calls, and they go, it worked, but not quite well enough. What can we do to tweak it? And then they tweak it and try it again. And so it's a scary concept. But this is a debate that unfortunately we have every time this topic comes up. The technology does exist to stop this. It does. And the government doesn't have the will to stop it because not enough people complain to the people in government. And so it's one of those things where one of these days they're going to do a phone storm and they're going to mess with the wrong people. And so the researcher from NCSU who said that he got hundreds of phone calls that disabled his phone system for a couple days because somebody had done a robocall storm using his number as the spoof number. One of these days, they're going to spoof the number of a representative or of a senator or of somebody at the DOJ or the FBI, and someone's going to go, you know something, this is silly. We've got to put an end to this. And they'll put an end to it. But that might be so far down the road, we might not be here to see it. Phones might not exist at that point. So I'm an optimist. Maybe it'll happen. So there you go. But Nathan, thanks for the story. The story is on ZDNet. Fascinating concept. I love when people do stuff like that. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Computers are not intelligent. They only think they are.